All Bets Are Off is a really great episode of The Golden Girls. This is the 24th episode of the 5th season. This is directed by Terry Hughes, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts, and I'll go through things chronologically. Starts off with Rose trying to paint a horse, and she's not having a good time of it. She wants to have a real visual representation of a horse, i.e. she wants to look at an actual horse. So they decide to go down to the racetrack. Dorothy also decides to go, and when she comes back, Sophia takes Dorothy into the kitchen, and there we learn that Dorothy had a gambling problem and that she shouldn't be gambling. But she said she didn't place a bet for herself. She just went down there, which I think at that point is believable. I did believe Dorothy then. And we'll come back to Dorothy in a moment. Blanche goes on a date with Donald, played by Michael Ensign, and she works with him. And she comes home humiliated. And we get a bit of suspense for maybe a minute as she tells the story of why she was humiliated. She went back to his apartment, she took her clothes off, she put his robe on, she slipped out of his robe, and he told her to put her clothes back on. Which, yes, would be humiliating. I could never imagine being so bold as to go to somebody's apartment after a date and strip. And then I just couldn't imagine doing that. So I don't blame him for saying put your clothes back on, because it was a bit of an awkward situation. But also that would be very humiliating all round. Dorothy is then on the phone and she phones up. She's supposed to have an interview for a teaching position, and she says her car broke down. She's stuck in the mechanics. All we see in that moment is Dorothy on the phone. We don't see the rest of the room, but I think it was very, very obvious that she wasn't stuck in the mechanics. And we do find out a second after she hangs up the phone that actually she's placing a bet, which is not great. And I felt a bit sick then, because here we have Dorothy very quickly sliding down that slippery slope in no time at all. She is lying. She is, I guess, going behind Sophia's back to do this. Yes, she's a grown woman, but she said she wouldn't. And it is a very slippery slope when it comes to any kind of addiction. And I honestly felt a little awful in that moment. And we're then back at the house. Rose tries to tell Dorothy a story. and Rose said, but it has a surprise ending, when Dorothy doesn't want to hear it. So Dorothy said, well, just tell me the ending. And all Rose says is, splat. I want to hear the rest of the story. Rose's stories should start with the ending, because it actually makes them seem more interesting. And then Sophia comes in, and she'd been going through Dorothy's purse. We do get some comedy here, because she'd found some betting slips, which is not funny, but she's going on about how she raised her to be morally right, and then she reveals that she was stealing from Dorothy's purse. So we do get a bit of comedy there, but obviously it's not a good look for Dorothy. And very briefly, we're taking a break from that to go back to Blanche's problem. And Rose suggests that Blanche was being too direct with Donald, and maybe he just wasn't the kind of person who was happy to receive a woman completely naked seconds after they get into the apartment, which I do think is fair enough. And then Sophia asks one of them to take her to the eye doctor. She can't ask Dorothy because, as she says, I spit on the name Dorothy, I have no daughter. And then she tries to spit and says, I have no spit. Which doesn't sound that funny, but just the way she said it, it really, really amused me. And it doesn't surprise me that the Golden Girls is able to address a really heavy topic such as gambling addiction, but keeping the comedy in there where necessary as well. None of the comedy is surrounding the actual gambling itself, which I think is a great decision, and I think definitely helps to strike a good balance here. And Sophia's up in the middle of the night because she can't sleep, and Blanche is up as well, and then Rose comes downstairs. Sophia calls Blanche a human mattress, which again doesn't sound that funny, but Blanche's face when she said that was a picture. And then we have a scene that I think is probably the most powerful scene in the whole episode, and Dorothy gets a phone call in the kitchen. It's very clear it's from the bookie. And she needs money, so she asks Rose to borrow $250, first of all to pay the paper boy, and then because Sophia needs an operation. And I didn't pick up on what Rose was doing immediately. Rose said, of course, you can have my money. Here's my bank card. Take out as much as you need. Pay me back when you can. And I did think, is Rose just being naive here? Because that's kind of what I was believing. But actually, we learn that that's not the case. Because Dorothy says to her, because Dorothy can't believe that Rose is just willingly giving her access to so much money. I think Dorothy is panicking in that moment, and this is just my reading of the situation. I could be mistaken, but I think Dorothy is realizing, hang on, Rose has just given me access to all of her money, and I know that I have problems with gambling. And I really think in that moment she was panicking, and she even said to Rose, I'm stealing your money. And Rose said, I know. And that's when I realized that Rose, of course, knew what the money was for. She was just hoping that Dorothy would not take the money from her, but that she wouldn't take the money from a friend, and she would realise that she can't do this. Rose also said, also, you can't use my bank card without my PIN. Turns out Rose had written the PIN on the bank card, which is the worst thing you can do. But it was a moving moment when Dorothy said she needed help, and she admitted that it was a problem and that she couldn't carry on like this. And I thought it was a really powerful scene, and I thought it was very well done. And we cut to Dorothy saying that she'd gone to Gamblers Anonymous, and I like the fact that they managed to end the episode with her having gone there, and they didn't kind of make a big deal out of it. Part of me wishes they'd maybe focused a little bit more on that, maybe shown Dorothy going there, so if anybody's in a similar situation, they can kind of see what the environment would be like, what Gamblers Anonymous would be like, the fact that nobody would be judging her there. I think they could have really done something really great by showing what a typical Gamblers Anonymous meeting looks like, maybe showing Dorothy's apprehension at going back there again, and then again showing that it was a judgment-free zone, and that everybody there has a similar experience, and that actually if anybody is thinking about going, they should take that step. So it's not a criticism that they didn't do that. I think they maybe could have just done that and maybe gained a little bit more from the episode. I don't know where they would have gained the time, because obviously an episode is only so many minutes, but I think that would have been something really great to include. And then we end the episode finding out that actually Donald just didn't want to sleep with anybody he worked with. So he quit his job and asked Blanche out, and now she's playing hard to get, like the possum in Rose's story. And it was a decent enough way to end it. So all things considered, All Bets Are Off is a brilliant episode of The Golden Girls. It's not the funniest, but there are certainly funny moments. Personal comedic highlights for me, I guess, would be Splat and I Have No Spit, which out of context really doesn't sound very funny, but Sophia's brilliant, and the facial expressions in this episode are great. But I think they handled the gambling issue with sensitivity. Again, I think they maybe could have done a little bit more with showing Dorothy going to Gamblers Anonymous, but again, they didn't need to. The fact alone that she went was in itself a positive thing for them to show. So it's a great episode, sensitively handled but funny at times, and ultimately All Bets Are Off is a great episode of The Golden Girls.